Hey YouTube and Babblerab, and I am using a new lens on my camera. And I'm also going to start maybe saying random things at the start of my videos just because make my channel more interesting. I don't know. Anyway, so anyone who's coming from my Yu-Gi-Oh channel to my Vanguard channel, which probably is not that many people, has probably seen, if they watched my Yang Zing deck profile, that I used the exact same lens on this one, had the really zoomed out thing. So just due to my other lens being temporarily out of commission, I'm trying this lens out, and I hope it does not ruin the video for you guys, but it should give you maybe like a more closer view of the cards. But anyway, I'm gonna now get to the actual deck itself. So this is my Nubatama deck post Reckless Rampage. And the reason why I decided to make a deck profile for this deck was because for the past pretty much 2 days or so, I'd been checking YouTube and just primarily YouTube, and then just today I went and looked on like Pojo just to see if other people were posting their Nubatama decks, just so I could compare my build versus their build and basically see what other people were playing, just because, you know, I'm curious, or I was curious. And for the past while, like I was expecting on the day of release, it was understandable due to the fact that, you know, it was the first day, people are probably, you know, still building the decks and all that, so, you know, I felt that was understandable. Yesterday and today, on the other hand, you know, I felt that something was a little weird, so I decided maybe I should record my deck to perhaps give you guys either a baseline or like a starting point for what to work with now that we've got this new support. So, before I begin, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my history with Nubatama. Outside of, or compared to like Bermuda Triangles, I haven't been playing the deck as long as I have been playing them. Bermudas were, for all intents and purposes, one of my first decks that I played in Vanguard. But I had picked up Nubatamas primarily because I felt that they were an under-supported clan. I figured, okay, well, let's see what this clan can do. So I picked them up, built a deck around them, and, you know, they worked relatively okay considering the fact they didn't have much support, but, you know, not on the same level as some of the more supported clans. So I played it a little bit right when I got the first build of the deck, not this one of course, before the Reckless Rampage booster, and then kind of just more or less fell off the map a little bit as I was trying out other decks and playing other decks. So when the Reckless Rampage booster came out, I got a little hyped because, hey, Nubatamas might be sweet after this, and this deck is absolutely bonkers, and I absolutely love it because of that. But after the full spoiler list got revealed for the deck, I immediately opened up pretty much a Word document. That's exactly what I did, and looked at all the cards, looked at the cards I currently had, and said, okay, what's going to work together, what's not going to work together, and came up with this build for the most part. Now, I am missing a few cards, and there was like a few changes from what I had on the Word document, but overall, it's mostly card for card for the build. So, in playtesting, the deck is absolutely crazy. The ability and the consistency in which that it can knock at least 4 cards out of your opponent's hand, and this is without even using the GR. It can take, if I do a break red turn, I can take at least 4 or 5 cards out of your hand in a single turn, which is absolutely incredible if you're the Nubatama player. If you're versing the deck when it does that, you're pretty unhappy, I would say. So, yeah, a good example of this is I was versing my friend's Narukami Big Bang Knuckle deck. Mind you, it was incomplete, but even when I was playing against it with my deleters, the deck still has a good enough grade 2 game that it did give me, or did worry me a little bit when I was playing against it, because it did pose a bit of a threat to me. When I was playing this deck versus it, I felt that I could properly English at the time, probably, and I also had felt that I was in total control of the game, and there was no threat from his deck to this deck. And it's, oh my god, it's utterly insane. And I love it. So anyway, I'm gonna go to the actual deck itself, so here we go. The starter is the new grade 1 Stealth Rogue of the Wintry Winds. I would love to have had that name memorized, but I don't. And what she does, I believe it's a she, I'm pretty certain it's a she. What she does is she has After Image. I'll explain what that does after I finish reading the rest of her effect. What she does is when you call her onto Rearguard, GB1 is the condition, you take one of the opponent's units in their bind zone and move it to the drop zone. Now if you do this, you get to countercharge 1, which is kind of really important because Nubatamas don't have any real way to unflip damage outside of hitting heal triggers. So I didn't know how good this card would be until I actually saw it in action, and oh my god, it's amazing. Now, moving on to what After Image does, basically when your opponent takes a bound card from their bind zone and puts it back into their hand, if your hand size is 6 or less, any units that you have with After Image may now activate their After Image effects and return to your hand. So essentially, if I go Tamahagane, bind one of your units, and I don't put that unit back into your drop zone, or don't put that unit into your drop zone off of one of my units, and that unit goes back to your hand, if I've got, say, 3 cards in hand, I can activate After Image 4 times. The first time puts my hand size up to 4, the second time puts it up to 5, third time puts it up to 6, and as I said, 6 or more, or 6 or less means that if you have 6 cards in hand, you can still activate another After Image ability, putting your max hand size back up to 7, which is really good, and it allows Nubatamas to conserve advantage very well. So, I'm probably just going to go with the trigger lamp like I've done before. I think when I did my deleters, I did start with the grade 3s, but I'm going to start with the triggers this time. Okay, so triggers are 4 heal, and yep, these are the older heal triggers from the past sets. I'm playing 2 draws, and my reasoning why is because the stand trigger and the new critical trigger have inbuilt drawing effects when they're used. So, less incentive to really be hitting draws. I'm playing 4 of the new stand trigger, and what he does is he has After Image as well. I think that's a dragon. It's definitely a dragon. It's got After Image as well, and its GB1 effect is, I'm going to actually read this because I totally don't remember. When it's placed on rearguard, if the number of cards in your hand is less than your opponent's, you draw a card, return it to your deck, shuffle your deck, and then you choose one of your units and gets power plus 3k. Now, I didn't think about this at the time until I actually played the card and drew into a second one. This sounds shockingly similar to Refros. And the reason why is because I believe the draw card shuffle back into deck thing is exactly what Refros does. So, essentially, if you can keep drawing into this, you can keep giving 3k to your one of your units. And again, it more or less replaces what the draw trigger will do and allows the deck to play a little more offensively because it has an inbuilt draw effect and recycles the stand trigger. Plus it gives power too. So that's a ton of stuff that it really does. Last triggers I'm playing are 4 of the crit that's actually worth money because I'm trading Nubatama stuff to one of my friends, and the deck core I didn't feel as though I wanted to give away the more expensive of the 2 crits. That's literally the reason why I'm playing this card, is solely because it's worth more money and I don't want to get rid of it. If I didn't care as much, I would be playing the other original crit trigger because I like the artwork more. But yeah, so 4 crits and then 2 more crits puts it to 6 crits. What this guy does is when your Vanguard with Shiranui in its name boosts, nope, not boosts, when it attacks, I believe you put it into your soul, and then you give your Vanguard 5k. Oh, you have to draw a card too. So yeah, you put him into your soul as the cost, you draw a card, and then you give your Vanguard 5k. So, he's pretty nice. Again, more draws, so there's essentially 6 units that give you additional drawing. Ideally, what I'm going to be doing probably is going to be replacing 2 of this guy for 2 more of this guy, because honestly, why would I not want to play that? Because I play Shiranui and free cards are good. I mean, he does go into your soul, so you do lose a 10k shield, but you do get to play a more offensive line. And when you're sniping cards out of your opponent's hand, it makes it harder to guard if they have less cards in hand and you're powering up your units. So, you know, that's a plus. Moving on to the grade 1s. Okay. Grade 1 lineup is for Dreadmaster. For everyone who doesn't know what Dreadmaster does, is when he boosts a successful attack on any unit whatsoever, it doesn't just have to be the Vanguard, you counterblast 1, and your opponent discards a card. Now, your opponent does have to have more cards in their hand than you, but you are playing Nubatama, and the afterimage ability means you can afford to start throwing more cards from your hand onto the field, so you can end up having less cards than your opponent. Next thing I am playing is 3 copies of the Limit Break Enabler, just so that I can essentially break ride whenever I want to, because I do play 4 copies of Kuchikiri Kongo in this deck. And the fact that he's a 7k booster is also, you know, I can't complain. And I'm playing 3 copies of the Stride Enabler. Lots of enabling in this deck. He's basically the same as anything else, except the target for his search is Shiranui, and 3 has so far been playing very well. Now, in the Word document, I did originally have the Perfect Guard that did the unflip, but I actually wasn't able to get any from the box, so I just was content with this one. Now, I'm not sure which of the 2 I want to play, because honestly, the effect of this card is actually really good. What it does is, when it boosts, you Soul Blast 1 and take a card from your opponent's bind zone and put it into the drop zone. Now, this doesn't mean, or this is regardless of whether or not you land the attack or not. In addition, there's after image, so you're basically able to pull it back to your hand after you go and knock a card out of the drop zone, bind zone. So that's actually really good, and that's why I'm a little conflicted as to whether or not I want to play the Unflipper or if I want to play this guy. You don't want to play the original Perfect Guard because he really doesn't do anything. So yeah. And maybe interested in like perhaps looking into trying more than one of my starter, but I'm not currently 100% certain whether I want to try that. Grade 2s are 3 copies of Agatamaru. This guy, I think it's a guy. Make sure it's a guy. I want to say it's a guy. It may not be a guy, which we don't really care too much about gender. Unless we're playing Bermuda Triangles, which unfortunately I do play Bermuda Triangles, so I do have to care about gender. But I've gone off topic. This is the one from the Fighters Collection. And what it does is if it lands a hit on your opponent's Vanguard, I think it's you choose. Let me check that. Yeah, you choose up to 1 card from your opponent's bind zone and put it into the drop zone. So, again, it's a pressure unit. If I've gone and bound something from your hand with one of my grade 4s, one of my grade 3s, or if I've gone and like bound something on your field with Tamahagane, basically if he hits, that's going to the drop zone. So it just increases the likelihood of your opponent not getting the cards that you bound back. I'm playing 4 copies of Miyabi. Miyabi is GB1, Counterblast 1 when it's boosted. If you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, you choose a card at random from their hand, they bind it face down, and Miyabi gains 3,000 power. I'm going to make sure that I read that whole effect correctly. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. And for practically every single condition of binding, they're always going back to your opponent's hand, so yeah. But yeah, what's good about this guy is you do your whole big pit play and everything, and throughout all of this, your opponent is choosing the cards that they're discarding. The moment that Miyabi hits the field and starts her attack, your opponent no longer has any control over what's actually being bound here, so you could snipe a Perfect Guard for all you know. And in addition, this deck can quite frequently just call its entire hand onto the field, so you're very often able to get Miyabi's skill off. And then playing 4 copies of Stealth Beast Tamahagane. And this one's pretty self-explanatory. It's an early game pressure unit because you call it the moment it hits Rearguard or Vanguard, so you could call or ride it, and it just binds a unit of your choosing. So again, if you're early game and you've got Tamahagane and like Agatamaru, your opponent needs to like guard a lot of attacks because they will lose units that they want to keep. Hopefully they want to keep. And it's basically can force out more guard early on. Plus, in addition, if your opponent tries to do like a grade 2 game against you, he can snipe key units and again force out additional guards or make them lose the units that you sniped. So that's what's nice about him. Moving on to the grade 3 lineup. Okay, grade 3 lineup is ideally in the end 4 copies of Shiranui because Shiranui is amazing. What it does is when you stride over him, you would counterblast 1, bind a unit your opponent controls, and then they have to discard a card of their choosing. Now, I only ended up pulling one copy of Shiranui from my Reckless Rampage box that I ended up buying. But, I bought like 3 of them, but that's not important. But this is not a bad substitute because he can search after image units, and he does have after image himself. So when I'm not proxying him as a Shiranui, he actually does stuff. But yeah, ideally the end build of this deck is going to be playing 4 copies of Shiranui because comboed with my other grade 3, it is a absolutely incredible and devastating play. Other grade 3 being 4 copies of Shura Stealth Dragon Kujikiri Kongo. He's the break ride for Nubatamas, and when you break right over top of him, your opponent discards a card, binds a card from their hand face down, and then whatever you broke road on top of him gains 10k. Now this is utterly irrelevant, the 10k, due to the fact that you're probably going to be striding right on top, but it's the sniping 2 cards out of your opponent's hand that makes him extremely potent in this deck. And going Kujikiri Kongo, break riding Shiranui over Kujikiri Kongo, when you're at 4 damage or if you have a limit break enabler online, they pitch 2 cards, you stride, Shiranui knocks out another card from their hand, plus 1 card from their field of your choosing. Depending on what you stride, you're taking another card out of their hand, and then depending on your rear guards, you're knocking another card out of their hand. If they had like only 6 cards or so, or 4, you can take their hand size from like 5 down to like 1, or like 6 to 2 or 1, depending on how good your field is. So it is a very, very mean play, and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to move on to the grade 4s. And I'm not sure, but you guys may find one of my choices a bit of a shock. So, first off, I'm playing double copies of Rakuto Stealth Dragon Jora Rukin. I probably butchered that name, and I apologize for everyone who is more familiar with that name, but I did my best. The primary reason why he's in here is for this play, because you're pretty vulnerable the turn you ride Kujikiri Kongo because of your break riding next turn. Not too much is happening, but what I find is that he basically provides some pressure during that intermission between when you're break riding Stealth Dragon Shiranui over Kujikiri Kongo and when you're riding Kujikiri Kongo. And he basically allows you to start striding and have a really decent first stride when you're starting your grade 3 game. So for everyone who doesn't know what he does, now that I've like gone and ranted about how good he is, I will now tell you what he does. So when he attacks, you counterblast 2. You choose one of your opponent's units and you bind it face up. Then your opponent chooses 1 card from their hand and binds it face down. Now, normally these would go back to your opponent's hand at the end of the turn. However, if you have a Vanguard, or not a Vanguard, because this is your Vanguard, if you have a hard card with Shura Stealth Dragon in its card name, luckily Kujikiri Kongo is a Shura Stealth Dragon, those cards are guaranteed to go back to the drop zone. So your opponent essentially is losing, your opponent is losing 2 cards pretty much guaranteed when you break, or when you stride this guy. Okay, so we're also playing 1 copy of Rakuto Stealth Dragon Sukumorkin. He's the GR from the Reckless Rampage set. And what he does is, when he's strode, you do need a... it does need to be GB2, so you do need something face spin your G-Zone for this to be live. But when you stride him, you will counterblast 2, and then unflip something from your G-Zone. And what your opponent then does is they choose 4 cards from their hand, and they bind everything else that isn't those 4 cards. Now, by itself, it's already pretty nasty if your opponent's got a large hand, but what gets even nastier is when you've strode him over Shiranui, because you can activate these 2 effects in any order which you choose. So ideally, you activate and resolve this effect first, fixing your opponent's hand size at 4, and then you activate and resolve Shiranui's effect, binding your opponent's rear guard and causing them to discard a card, putting their hand size down to 3. Now, something that's even more crazy than like the whole effect is the fact that I'm relatively perfectly content with playing one of this guy, because he may seem like a really good go-to card, but he really just only hard counters decks that have very high hand counts. Now, does that mean that I'm going to stop playing him? Absolutely not. His effect is godly, and when I don't feel like thinking or have a decent hand, he can definitely put the pressure on your opponent. I also plan on probably eventually getting 2 of him at the very least, but depending on what combos you guys may think up, or if other people think up additional combos with this guy, he may be going up to more than just 2. But at the moment, I'm pretty happy with just 1 copy of him, and potentially 2 in the future. One card that I'm not happy having 2 of is actually 2 copies of Rakuto Stealth Rogue Atago Lord. Primarily because I'm usually able to get my opponent's hand size into her critical level condition. Now what she does is when she attacks, I think that's a she, I'm not going to worry about gender, so when this card attacks, you need the GB2, just like with Sukumorkin. You counterblast 1, unflip a copy of herself, so Persona Flip, and then I believe it's snipe a random card of your opponent's hand. Your opponent chooses a card from their hand, binds it face down, and then what gets even nastier is when there's 3 or less cards in hand. When this effect happens, or when it resolves, sorry, this unit gets +1 critical. So that's pretty nasty, and kind of the reason why I want to have more than just 1 copy or just 2 copies of this card is so that I can resolve the effect at least twice in a game. You know, assuming that your opponent's alive that long. But this condition is quite easy to achieve because throughout the game you should be, or the moment you're hitting grade 3, you should be putting pressure on your opponent's hand and reducing their resources, forcing them to either invest harder onto the field or to use additional guards or take higher amounts of damage, which eventually will yield, if they've just said, okay, I'm going to hold what remaining cards I have in my hand and not worry about it. When this unit swings and I am able to snipe a lot of your cards, then you've got a guard with pretty much everything you got. But yeah, currently have 2. I want to play 4, just like I want to play probably 2 of the GR. Then I'm playing 1 copy of what Neosis calls the Goat Dragon. What he does on hit is, if it lands a hit, your opponent chooses a card from the hand and discards it. I don't like it as much as the new rare that Nubatama's got, but I recently put him in, and I'm testing him out to see how good he is. And then the last 2 cards I'm playing are 2 copies of, I believe that's Rakuto Stealth Dragon Zaramarican. I believe I got that wrong, maybe Zaramarican. The names that Nubatamas have are very difficult to pronounce if you are of the English. Heck, if you're of the other language too, they may be difficult to pronounce. I don't know. They're difficult for me to pronounce. But what he does is essentially it's the same thing as there's the goat. I'm going to call it the goat because I really don't want to try to pronounce that name. Basically, if he lands a hit, your opponent chooses a random card from their hand. Now, the key in this sentence is random. Means that they don't get to pick what they're losing from their hand, and they bind it face down. And if you have 3 or more units with after image in their names, that card goes to the drop zone instead. So I find this to be a little more superior than the Dragon Goat, just primarily because it says random versus discard. I mean, I understand discard means the card's permanent, but I kind of prefer it where your opponent doesn't get the luxury of choosing what they're losing from their hand, just so that if you end up getting lucky or they end up getting unlucky, there goes a perfect guard, or there goes a combo piece that they're missing. That's just my preference. Now, before I end the video, there's one more card I do need to talk about that I don't run in the deck, and I'm pretty certain that most of you who are more familiar with the new Nubatama cards are probably asking why I'm not running this card. So I'm going to cut to that right now. And that particular card in question is a little known beauty called Assault Dragon Assault Rex. Now, I know what all of you guys are thinking. Babblerab, why aren't you playing Assault Dragon Assault Rex? It's so good. It's like the best card. You play it, and then you bind the Rex from your hand, and then it gets power. It's 11k. It's like, swing, swing. And it's just so good, and it just does things. Like, what does it do? During your turn, if you have one with Rex in the card name, you get a card. It just is so good, right? It's so good. Now, mind you, when I am playing Rexes, I will be playing 4 of this card because I believe that this card is really good. But this is Nubatama, not Rexes. So let's get to the actual card, which is Stealth Dragon, Please stand by, Babblerab is having trouble pronunciation. Stealth Dragon Nubatamas. Nubatamas. That's it. That's the last time I'm trying to pronounce that. Okay. So he's got After Image. So when your opponent's bound card is put into his or her hand, I honestly should have just left it off at the Assault Rex, not trying to pronounce the Nubatama names. But we're not talking about Assault Rex. I'll talk about Assault Rex at a later date. But anyway, so when the opponent puts a bound card into hand, it's basically the After Image effect, so I should probably just stop reading that. But you Soul Blast 1, Counter Blast 1. When it's placed on rear guard, if you have a Vanguard with Shiranui in card name, you can pay the cost. If you do, choose up to one of your rear guards, and it gets 3k in After Image. Oh, both get 3k in After Image. I'm sorry, I misread that. But I'm certain some of you guys are probably wondering why I'm not running this card, and I don't know what I would take out for it. Maybe a Gadamaru, but I'm kind of enjoying how well it's been running in the deck. And my other initial reason for not running this is I'm not 100% certain whether or not I'll be seeing Shiranui every game, and this is not even in the current build. It's when I have the 4 Shiranui. Like, there's probably a pretty good chance I will see it, but I'm worried in that one scenario where I end up drawing multiples of this guy, or end up drawing this guy and not seeing a Shiranui. He pretty much doesn't do too much because you need a Shiranui for his effect to be live. I absolutely love what he does. He can After Image any unit. It means you can reuse like Tamahagane, or like, I don't know what else you would reuse. I think the first thing that comes to mind is Tamahagane. So yeah, you can reuse Tamahagane, and that's really good, don't get me wrong, but I just don't know, like, consistency-wise, I'm not certain how consistent it would run. I will have to test it when I get my four Shiranuis, and I don't know what I'm going to cut for him yet. So that's that little spiel on the card, and that is Assault Rex, as seen before. So I will leave you guys off with that Assault Dragon Assault Rex, and I'm Babblerab, and I will talk to you guys later. And before I cut off, because I totally forgot this, if you have any questions, leave them below. If you have any suggestions for the deck, leave them below. And nope, that's it. See ya.